Prasenjit from 1993 batch, and the moderator is Abhishek from 1993 batch. Abhishek is an international cardiologist based in UK. He has profound commitment to healthcare and the wealth of knowledge in his field. Abhishek is not only dedicated physician whose expertise and compassion have touched the life of many, but also a multi-talented individual, a wonderful singer, orator, and above all, a great human being. So I'd like to call Abhishek on stage to introduce our speaker, Prasenjit, and to moderate this session. Abhishek, the stage is all yours.
Thank you, Vikas. As I said yesterday, it's such a kind and warm welcome. It's really heartfelt, and I'm truly honored. So thank you for the invite to moderate, and it's a great privilege to be moderating this session for a very, very dear friend, Prasenjit. He joined with the Peach when in class 5. So we all started in class 4. He joined in class 5. It's a selected group of people who joined in class 5. And since then, we studied together till we went to DPS RK. Prasenjit, in his own way, he's an amazing, amazing individual. Very bright, very talented. He was one of the shining stars in our batch, especially in terms of his general knowledge and quizzing. And everybody wanted him to be on their team. So I think we did win. I think we won in class 10. Were we in opposing different teams, opposite teams? I'm not sure. I don't remember that. Yes. But
Yeah.
I think somehow we won. So he's always been very committed, very funny as well. So he looks very quiet, but in his own way, is at the same time, when you interact with him, when you come to know him, he's got a very dry sense of humor. And we've enjoyed the company, especially more so in DPS. We became very close because there were only a handful of us. And having some of the friends from RKM that transition into DPS RK and studying together there, it made it quite easy. We sort of eased ourselves in with the familiarity of our colleagues and friends there. So after DPS, Prasenjit completed his bachelor's in pharmaceutical sciences in 2000, and then master's in biomedical engineering from Jadavpur University. And then he went to US, where he completed his PhD from University of Toledo. Now, currently, he works as a director of clinical research at Thrive. I was briefly looking at his LinkedIn profile, a master researcher, innovator, excellent problem-solving skills, organizational skills, and all that is very true. This is Prasenjit's session, so I'll not take a lot of time. And I would, of course, like our batchmates from the CANS 93 group, whoever has joined, to share some of their anecdotes and their pleasant experiences with Prasenjit. But without taking too much time, Prasenjit, the floor is yours, and it's a great pleasure and a privilege to introduce you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the kind words, Abhishek. And good evening, everyone, and good afternoon, and everything in between. And happy Diwali as well. So I think the Diwali is tomorrow, right? Yeah.
Yeah, Dada.
So, okay. So I made a very short, non-technical PowerPoint to share the basic ideas of clinical trials. So let me share the screen. Can everyone see my PowerPoint?
Not still.
Dada, it's loading. I think it will take
Okay.
1 minute.
So let me know when it is.
You're sharing your screen, but we can't see anything. Is it a window you're sharing or your desktop?
Yeah, I'm sharing my screen. Let's see. Let me stop and start again. Stop.
Yeah, Dada, okay. Please try again.
Share. Hmm. Okay. Window. Hmm. Which one? This one? This one?
কোথায় পুজো টুজো না না এমনি করে করছি না তোমার তোমার আইডি আলাদা হচ্ছে
Yeah, Dada, we can see your screen. Dada, it's okay now.
Okay,
Prasenjit,
can you hear me now?
yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. Let me know if you can see the PowerPoint now.
Yeah, Dada, I can
Yeah,
see.
yeah, visible.
Okay.
It's amazing, Dada.
Okay. Sorry about that hitch. So yeah, so today we are going to talk about clinical research, which is the last step in the long process of getting a new drug in the market. So just a quick summary. I have a total of 21 slides. It don't take too long. We are already in the second slide. I will start with a brief introduction about what is clinical trial, and then I'll talk about the stakeholders. What are the people who are playing the role here? And I'll talk about a brief history. And the reason I'm going to talk about history, so that you can appreciate the regulations. I mean, this is a very regulated industry. And once we look into the history, that will help us appreciate the reason behind all these regulations we have. And then I will talk shortly about the different carriers in the field of clinical trials. First, there are certain specific terms used in the industry, like any other industry, they have their own terms. So here, when we say IP, we mean the investigational product. So that is the new molecule, I mean the drug or a medical device or the vaccine that is being tested for getting approved in the market. So that is called the IP. So the primary goal of clinical research is to establish the safety of the IP. That is the most important thing, that it is safe to use. Once it is safe, then you try to prove, yes, it is effective. It is effective compared to what is the standard of care now, or in case there is nothing really in the market at present, you compare it with a placebo, that it is more effective than the placebo. So there are, technically speaking, two kinds of clinical research. The first one is called observational studies, and the second one, the clinical trial. So in the observational studies, you are not administering any drug or anything. You already have the data. So you are looking at the data that had been already collected. Say you are studying breast cancer, and then you have 10 years of data of the different scans of the patient. So you are looking into that data and you are coming up with conclusions. So that is observational studies. And in the clinical trials, we are actually administering the IP and seeing how the patients have reacted to the IP. So just to give, I mean, any presentation you hear on clinical research, this is one slide everyone is going to show. So just to give you a brief overview of the entire process of the drug development. So it all starts in a basic science lab where the first step is to come up with a new molecule. So that new molecule is your drug. So nowadays there is an entire branch of science like bioinformatics where they use computer modeling and everything to come up with the design of a molecule that would target a specific protein or an enzyme. And then you have the formulation scientists who come up how to administer that molecule into the body. Till then, up to this stage, things are going on in the lab bench. After that, once you succeed in those two steps, you test them in a petri dish or a tube or even in lab animals, and that depends on country-specific requirements. So this is what is called the preclinical testing, and it takes about 3 to 4 years. So once you have data from the lab and animal studies, you submit an application. In case of US, you submit it to the FDA, the Food and Drugs Administration. You submit what is called the investigational new drug application, which means you are seeking their approval to conduct these studies in human beings. You are saying, look, I have the data from the animal studies. It looks safe. It looks promising. Would you approve us to test this molecule or the vaccine or whatever the IP is in human volunteers? You file the IND. And you have to be very specific about how you are going to conduct the human studies. So you have to submit a protocol. So that is called the research protocol. Even a single word here and there, if it changes, you have to file it again and again wait for their approval. So very stringent requirements in terms of the research protocol. And anytime, I mean, it always happens, there are certain violations of the protocol. I mean, you're supposed to be doing like this, but you do that, that's okay. But you have to document it and you have to let them know this is what happened. So anyway, so once you get the approval from the FDA to perform the human trials, you start your trials in 3 phases, phase 1, 2, and 3. So phase 1 is relatively small. You have like about 50 subjects. And the primary goal of the phase 1 is to establish the safety of the drug. That's all. You are trying to find out if the drug is safe to use in human beings. So you do the studies in healthy human volunteers. And also you try to titrate the dosing. So once the data from phase 1, and meanwhile, you're always communicating with the FDA. Once you have good data from the phase 1, you go ahead for phase 2, slightly larger scale. And here you are trying to study if the drug is also effective. The safety is already being established in a small population. In this stage, you are trying to study if the drug is also effective. Again, once you have the data from the phase 2, you move to phase 3, which is the largest scale clinical trial among the research part. And you have around 3,000 human volunteers. You are studying the safety and the effectiveness in a large scale. So once you get the data from phase 3, you submit the new drug application where you say, look, I have the data from the human subjects as well. Now, can I market the drug? And most of the time, the FDA will give a conditional approval that, okay, you can go ahead and market, but I'm going to watch your data very closely for the next 1 year or 2 year, depending on other similar drugs that are in the market. How new is this drug? They will continue monitoring uh, the results, the outcome of using this data. So that's phase 4, also called pharmacovigilance. There is an entire team that look into the data, because right now, I mean, millions of people are using the data, right? So no matter how good your clinical trial was, even at phase 3, you had at the most 3,000 patients who took the drug, and now you are using the drug on millions of population. So this is a brief overview of the drug development process. So who are the stakeholders? Who are the people who are involved in this process? So the first one is called the sponsor. Here, sponsor means the company. Say you own a drug company and you have come up with a new molecule X to treat high blood pressure. So you'll be called the sponsor, because the molecule is your molecule and you are going to sponsor the study. So sponsor, the well-known sponsors are like the Pfizer, the Glaxo, Merck, Johnson and Johnson. So they are the big players. However, the drug companies, their specialty is in the formulation. They come up with a new drug, they manufacture the drug, but they do not conduct the trials. They do not conduct the clinical trials. So they outsource it to the CRO. CRO is Contract Research Organization. And the big players among the CRO are Medpace, Quintile, Charles River. So they are the ones who actually do the clinical study for the sponsor. And now, once the CRO, they take a study for a sponsor, they contact the different sites. So the research site is the actual place where that study is going to happen. So the research site, I'll talk more about the research site in my later slides. And meanwhile, everything you do during this process is being very, very closely watched, on one hand, by the regulatory body, which is the FDA. They are checking each and every data you have. Anytime you have any serious reaction, you have to notify them like in 24 hours. You have to fax them, email them, so that they know about it as soon as possible. At the same time, you have to get an approval from the Institutional Review Board, called the IRB, that is the ethical committee, who are also overseeing how the patients are being treated. Do they know what is going on? So you have the FDA, the regulatory body, on one hand, and on the other hand, you have the Institutional Review Board, who make sure that the study is being done ethically and as per the research protocol. However, even though, as you have seen in the last slide, the sponsor contacts the CRO and the CRO conducts the study in the different sites, the ultimate responsibility, if anything goes wrong, the ultimate responsibility is on the sponsor. Or you cannot say, oh, I didn't know what happened, it was done at the site. No, the ultimate responsibility is on the sponsor. If anything goes wrong, they are the ones who are going to get face the result. They have to make sure that all the regulatory requirements have been followed. They have to make sure that they submit any changes in the protocol, which happens all the time. Once you start with the protocol, and as you get to know more and more about that particular product, there are always changes made to the protocol. And they provide the money. They are the ones providing the money for the entire study. They provide the money to the CROs, and the CROs provide the money to the research sites. And the CRO, as I said earlier, they are the ones whose expertise is in the operational aspects of the clinical trials. They are the ones who will identify the sites. They will post in their website that we have a new study where we are going to study the effectiveness of, say, high cholesterol medicine. And then the sites, which are basically clinics or hospitals, they will say, yes, we get a lot of patients with high cholesterol or high blood pressure or diabetes. They submit the application to the CRO. So the research site, the place where the research actually happens, it can be an individual site, it's like a private clinic that has like 200 patients, 1,000 patients, or it can be a university department, say the Department of Cardiology or the Department of Cancer, or a hospital, a specialty hospital. So that is the place where the research will be conducted. Or this is a new thing that is coming up big nowadays. They have something called site network, where it is the same owner, it's one owner, one organization. They have multiple research sites across the country or across the globe. So they are called a site network. And the CROs, they prefer the site network because once they get in touch with one site network, they automatically ensure that there is a wide geographical and population variation across the nation, because that site network has numerous sites everywhere. So the simplest trial design, is like very, very basic design, is that say you have a group of 10 patients, you have two groups. One is the treatment group, the other is the control group. The treatment group is going to be administered the new product, and the control group, they will get a control or a placebo. They are blinded. So the patients don't know what they are getting. Even the clinic that is administering the IP, even they don't know whether it is the actual drug or it is a placebo. And then you follow up. You follow up after every 2 months, 4 months for the entire duration of the study, which is typically about like 1.5 years. And then once you collect the results, you study the results. Study typically, again, as I said, the number one goal is to make sure it is safe. Again and again, I want to emphasize the word safety. That is the number one thing in clinical trials. And then, of course, the effectiveness of the drug. This slide is from actual study. I cannot share the name because of confidential agreements and everything. But just to give an example, say a typical study has like around 150, 125 centers across the nation or across the globe. And we have, say, 300 to 400 participants for that study in a phase 2. We give 250 patients who will actually get the drug, and then say 125 patients who will be placebo. They won't get the drug. And then so the clinic, they will contact the patients that I think you fit in the criteria for this study. So can you please visit us? So every study has a exclusion criteria and an inclusion criteria. So if you are studying a blood pressure medicine, so the inclusion criteria will say that that patient needs to have a high blood pressure, that patient needs to be in that age group. So everything in the inclusion criteria, say that you have like 10 points, they should check all the 10 points. Even if one is not checked, then no, that patient does not qualify for this study. And on the other hand, you have a list of exclusion criteria. So again, say you have 10 points at pregnancy. If someone is pregnant, no, they cannot enroll in the study. If someone is a smoker, I'm just giving an example. So any point out of the 10 points in the exclusion criteria, they cannot participate in the study. So what you do first, you screen the patients. You make sure that they meet all the requirements of the inclusion criteria and they do not match any of the requirements of the exclusion criteria. So that visit where you screen the patient, it is called V0. And V1 is where you collect the base data. You get their, blood pressure, the body temperature, height, weight, and everything. And say in this case, the study will run for 1 year. Nowadays, some of the studies, the patient doesn't really need to come to the clinic. They are given something like it looks like a phone, like a smartphone, and they are contacted via video, and they're also, they send by FedEx their blood pressure monitor and all those things, and they record themselves and send the data. They email the data or they text the data through their app. So what we measure during this follow-up, say you have the first visit, which is the V0 and the V1, and then you're monitoring the patients for next 1 year. The simple design is that every time you contact the patient either in person or remotely, there is a questionnaire. I mean, making sure they're feeling well, nothing has changed in the lifestyle, they still have the same appetite or the sleep. You collect their vital signs, and almost all studies require a ECG every visit. And then if it is like a respiratory study, you get the data from the spirometry, which is about the breathing and everything. You collect the blood sample, send it to the lab, and then you give them the IP, which is the drug. So before giving the IP, you're collecting the data so that you know what happened since the last IP administration. I'll just keep this slide simple. It is just an overview of the different study visits. Again, starts with V0 at the top, and then you follow up the patient till like 16 visits. So initially you start the patient like every 2 weeks, then you move on to 4 weeks, and then sometimes the last one may be spaced 6 weeks or 8 weeks, or it may be the same 4 weeks. As you can see, it requires a lot of commitment on the part of the patient as well. What if they move, they got a new job? I mean, they're like normal people. I mean, the study volunteers, they're just like you and me. They have one of these conditions. Maybe they have, respiratory problem, or they have high blood pressure, or they have pain, or they have, psychological issues. They're just normal people. They have a job. They have to get day off. So these are the variables that you have to really face in the real life. That to get a patient for a period of 1 year, uh, it takes at least 1 hour to conduct one visit. So you have to explain them the first visit that yes, it requires a lot of commitment from their part as well. So what goes in a research site, the place where the trial actually happens, is that you have a medical doctor, you have a research nurse, and you have a coordinator, the one who contacts the patient. And, if for any reason the patient is not able to come on a certain day, they will make an appointment for the next day. But everyone at the research site needs to understand the study protocol, because as I said, there is very little margin of error. So they have to be very well trained about the protocol. And the investigator, they have to know their responsibilities. If they see anything that looks slightly off, they have to document it and report it. Do not try to hide anything. Yes, things can go wrong, but do not try to hide it. Document it, communicate it. And also important is how you store the IP. There are some of the investigational products that need to be stored under certain temperature and humidity requirements, and how you dispose them. So everything is very regulated. And then you have to deal with the different vendors. Like once you collect the blood sample after a study, you have to send it to the lab. The lab will look into the sample and send you the data, make sure they have sent everything that you wanted. So you have the lab vendors, you have the ones that provide the IRTs, like the cell phone where they can do it remotely. You have to, there are problems. Sometimes you do not get the data. You have to contact the vendors to make sure that everything is working properly, and to make sure that the data that you are getting is quality data. And every site, in order to get a clinical study, because the sponsors are paying the CROs, and the CROs are paying the research sites, right? Because they have their expenses, they have to pay the staff, and they have to pay the patient because they are making the trouble of driving to the site, spending 1 hour. Uh, so what is important is how many patients you can recruit for a particular study. So that recruitment number is very important. And how good is your RBM, your risk-based monitoring? How quickly you contact a patient once something goes wrong. So these are the parameters that the CROs, they use to decide if a particular site qualifies or if they want to give that study to that site. So yeah, I mean, nowadays it is done in a very fancy way. But if you look back into the history, again, this is to the best of our knowledge. I'm sure somewhere in the world there was a clinical trial done before 1747. But in our documented history, the credit for the first human trial goes to James Lind, who studied the effect of vitamin C in oranges and lemons on the sailors, on the sailors' health, if that can help to treat scurvy. Moving on, again, we all know about the heinous medical experiments that were conducted during World War II. People conducted medical research in a wrong way. They almost played with human beings, just like objects. They would do experiments that would not benefit the patient. I mean, there were studies done where they would cut the arm or the leg of one person intentionally to study how if it can be transplanted, because they had a army fighting on different fronts. They wanted to see if, say, a soldier has some kind of amputation, if they can use those body parts for the soldiers. They created low pressure environment to study the effect of high altitude. They would intentionally drown people to see how can they survive in the water. So all kinds of damaging experiments were done. But again, don't blame only the World War II players. Even in the US, till as late as 1970s, they had done unethical studies. So one of the famous one is the study of syphilis that was done in the US between 1930 to 1970. The goal of the study was to study syphilis, which is a sexually transmitted disease. They wanted to study how this disease progressed in the Black population. They were not told that they were being studied for syphilis. They were told that, oh, we're just going to check for bad blood. I mean, bad blood, it just means back in that period of time, someone with low hemoglobin or anemia, someone who's feeling weak. So they thought that they will get medical treatment, they will study them. So they were not told the real purpose of their studies. So they enrolled 600 people in 1932 to study syphilis. And what is almost unbelievable is that in 1947, the treatment of syphilis already came to the market. I mean, penicillin, it became the standard of care in 1947. But they continued with the study. They did not treat these people with the drug because they wanted to continue with the study. Only in 1972, this thing became a news and that. And after that, they came up with no. I mean, even though the clinical trials, a lot of them have good motives, they need to be regulated, which I'm going to talk later in the slide. So these are the kind of studies that called for more regulations, because anything, even though it is mostly done for the good of human beings, it can also be misused. So to ensure patient safety, we have a lot of regulations in place now to take care of the patient safety part. And the other part of clinical trial is the quality of the data that you get. So you have to have good data to make a meaningful conclusion from the studies. However, because big money is involved in these clinical trials, and once a drug gets approved, once it is marketed, we're talking about billions of dollars that come out from these drugs. So there is always a tendency on part of these stakeholders to not be completely honest about their studies. So one such study is the Vioxx study. So the Vioxx is a drug used that was used to treat pain in arthritis patient. So this drug was studied against another painkiller in the time, and that time, which is still in the market. At least I know it is in US. It is called naproxen. So they studied Vioxx with naproxen. However, during the clinical trials, it was almost clear that Vioxx, it has serious cardiac effects. It causes problem to the heart. But they were not really truthful about the data. They wanted to hide the bad things, and they wanted to claim that it is a very effective painkiller, not completely honest about the serious side effect it has on the human heart. So this thing is a natural tendency that comes with the stakeholders to say more about the good part and hide the side effects. So we have an Office of Research and Integrity. So they are the ones who will look very closely into the data to see if there is any sign of data fabrication. And by the way, data fabrication is a big problem in science, because people try to, because of various reasons, they try to come up with data that is not real. They know that they have to come up with a product that works, so they will fabricate the data to say that yes, this is good, its side effects are less. So you have the Office of Research and Integrity, and every year, even as late as 2023, you already have 10 cases where that people have been penalized, they have been imposed administrative actions for not being honest about the data. So the regulations that are in place now, they are mostly focused about patient safety, that you are not doing any harm to the patients. So you have to obtain informed consent from the patient. That means the patient has to know right at the beginning of the study, what is the study? What is the chance that they might face any serious effects during this process? You have to explain them everything. And then they will decide without any pressure if they want to participate in the study. And during this time, the institutional review boards, they are watching you. They are seeing everything, how the patients are treated. And all the investigators, they have to disclose if they have any financial conflict, if there's any conflict of interest. Like, say, someone works for a company, that person cannot be doing the clinical trials. And every result, every changes, whatever came across, good, bad, doesn't matter. Everything has to be filed and properly documented. So this is slightly off, and the reason I included in this presentation is that no matter where I go and talk about clinical trials, I am always asked, what happened to the COVID-19 vaccine? How did it get approved so quickly? So I just thought of including this slide. So COVID-19 vaccine got approval under something called emergency use approval. Because it was an emergency situation, so they wanted to expedite the process. However, I mean, you still do your due diligence. You have to still document and file the chemistry, the manufacturing, and the control information for the vaccine. And you still obtain the data from the phase 1, if you remember the first study where you study the safety, phase 2, a smaller study of the safety and effectiveness. You still do the phase 1 and 2. But if you remember, phase 3 was the one that took the longest time. So in case of EUA, what they do is they kind of they shorten the median follow-up of the phase 3 data. Is that okay? You don't need to follow the patient for 1 year. I mean, I will take the data, whatever you have, for the 2 months. So that is the part where it is shortened. That okay, no need to follow the patient for. We don't have 2 year time to wait to see the vaccine is effective. I will get you whatever data you have, and then the review by the FDA that gets priority, because it's like FDA gets hundreds and hundreds of applications. They take their time because again there is a shortage of specialist people who can look into the applications, who understand the science. But for EUA, they get the first priority. So that is what actually expedited the process. That's why we could come up with the safe and effective COVID vaccine so quickly. So the last slide, I will talk about the different careers in the field of clinical research. So it is a healthcare field. However, lately I see a lot of people with non-healthcare background in this field. So I have just broadly classified the different jobs in this field into two. The ones where you have patient interaction and where there are a lot of people. I come across a lot of doctors, nurses. They love what they do, but they really don't want to interact with the patients. They want to work in their own way. So the other class is the other jobs where the patient interaction is minimum. Again, for patient interaction, the typical jobs, the medical doctor, you have the nurse, and the research coordinator, the one who's coordinating the research at the research site. And the ones, the behind the scene jobs in this field of clinical trials, the first one is the study monitor. So the study monitor works for the CRO. So if you remember, the sponsor gives the study to a CRO, the CRO gives the study to different sites. The CRO has someone who visits all these sites to make sure that everything is done properly. So that person is called the CRA, or the study monitor. He will go and visit the sites after 4 weeks or 6 weeks, whatever the requirement is, to check everything is done the way it should have been done. Then you have the safety scientist. The safety scientist will look into the data that has been collected, making sure that no patient has been harmed. And sorry, this should be safety physician. I missed the N. They also, again, they look into more details about the safety of the patients. And the most important requirement is for good statistician. So this process of design of experiments, how you design the clinical trials, it itself, is like a big thing. So you have the statisticians, you have the project managers who have timelines. You have to, because they have the pressure, they're providing the money, they need to come up with a product in timeline. So you have the project managers. Nowadays, because a lot of them is done remotely, you have data scientists, you have AI specialists. And another career that is very, very in demand is for medical writers. Once you get all the data, you have to write a nice story to the FDA. It's all about writing the medical results in a nice way to the FDA. So you need medical writers, you need business analysts, and you also need auditors. Someone who will pay surprise visits to these sites. So they are called the QA scientists or auditors. So that's in a nutshell. I hope I have been able to share a few things that everyone will remember and learn more about the process of clinical trials. So this was my presentation.
Thank you, Prasenjit. It was a master class. It's a very complicated field. People who have been associated or are actively associated with clinical studies, they understand the trials and tribulations of doing a clinical trial. Whether you are a sponsor or a principal investigator or whatever it is. But thank you for that very succinct, very clear overview of a very complicated field. Anybody, any questions?
The, yeah, Abhishek, it is me, Dr. Shrikant Basu from 79 batch.
Hello, Dada.
Yeah. I must thank Prasenjit for, explaining such complicated terms which we from the medical field come across in a very simplified way, almost explained to like a lay person. I'm sure those who are attending or those who are likely to visit the video later will definitely gain out from it, especially for the young one who are pursuing a career in medical or related fields. Prasenjit, little bit about the COVID thing, because COVID kind of shortened all the steps, isn't it? If you look at the whole, any new product takes almost any new vaccine. Since I'm a pediatrician, I'm talking about vaccines, about 7 to 8 years to come to the market. Uh, Now I'm part of the adverse event research group of Government of India. So we find that data was mainly, it has been kept with the government and is never published in the public domain. So is it true for other countries as well? Like many, some of the one or two vaccines had very serious side effects, which was not told to the people. Obviously, there are much more benefits because we say that the benefit outweighs the risk, then definitely the product is important. But how far it is true? I just want to know from the horse's mouth. Thank you.
Yes, so thank you, Shikandada, for your nice question. And again, thank you everyone for being patient and listening. I hope it was not too boring. So, so as I said earlier, phase 1 and 2 were done just like any other studies. So the phase 1 and the phase 2 during the COVID vaccine, they were done just like any other studies. But it was phase 3 which was shortened. So for the phase 3 data, the sites were required to send data only for 2 months of follow-up. So the phase 3 was significantly shortened, and also the review process, because when you send the data after phase 1 or phase 2, the data, the documents, it sits in the office for 1 year. But in case of COVID, they got prioritized. They looked into their application above any other applications. So I think the science was a little bit compromised because the phase 3 was shortened. But a lot of the time savings was because they prioritized the COVID application. And again, if you look into most of the drugs that are in the market now, they were not in the market 10 years ago. Or in other words, the top selling drugs in the 1980s, none of them are in the market now. Because the longer a drug stays in the market, the more we know about the long-term effects, the more we come up with any product that is better than that existing one. And I think the same thing is going to happen. We'll have more data about COVID, about its side effects and everything. But at that point of time, I think we'll all agree on this, that it saved more lives than the damage that may come out from the vaccine. So that was what played into the minds of the reviewers, that at this point of time, this is what we need. बात का बाद में देखेंगे, अब तो उसको पहले रोकते हैं.
No, because now we are seeing one or two offbeat incidents in which the young people are dying out of say certain cardiac attack, whether it is due to post-COVID effect, whether it is a vaccine per se, that Covishield vaccine to be precise. So there is sometimes debate whether it is vaccine per se caused that or whether it was due to post-COVID. Again, we don't know the exact answer. That's for sure. So
yeah,
maybe, yeah.
What is the percentage of population where you are seeing those kind of serious effects?
No. I agree. There is much less, but yes, we do get once in a week some young people dying due to some heart attack, something which is really unheard of. Now, maybe, so we don't know exact. If you look at the overall incidence or prevalence, it's much less. Yes, that is obviously does not qualify for that kind of thing. Prasenjit, one more thing, because what I find, Abhishek, I'm not intruding upon others' time, I believe.
No, please carry on. We're enjoying this conversation.
Because sometimes what happens, some drugs like launched by US or say UK, right? But US, Indian company like Cipla or all those things, after a few years, they again relaunch those products with a much less price, right? And in a way, it has done wonders for the developing population, especially for HIV, as we all know. Cipla has actually brought down the cost of the drug and has saved millions of lives, if not millions, a lot of lives, right? So what is the patent thing? Is some called process? I heard about process of patent or process of molecule where you can circumvent the whole process. You can just change the manner in which the product is produced. You can gain a patent. I mean, can you explain a little bit to us, because you being in that field? So I thought so.
So Abhishek, you want to answer the question or?
No, you carry on. You're the expert.
Yes, so getting a patent is not the end goal. So, I mean, a lot of people I know, they have patents on different things. So the important thing is what is going to come out of that patent. So can you have a product coming out of that patent? Can you market a product? Can you commercialize the product? So out of from my experience, out of 1,000 patent applications, maybe one or two are commercialized. So the real journey actually starts after you get your patent. So the process of getting a patent till it is being marketed, that is the most challenging part. I'm not sure if that was your question.
Yeah, no, it's kind of related, because suppose a company in US launches a drug at a very high price, and after a few years, the Indian companies take out the same drug at a much lesser price. So I just want to know, what is the, I mean, how do they manage this kind of thing? What is the, what is the process like when the same drug marketed, because that is one of the point of contention across the trade for the different countries. How can you do that? So probably the
Oh, I
Indians are
see.
doing, yeah, yeah.
So in the US, what happens, you won't believe it. So I'll give an example. So
Yeah,
in
yeah, yeah.
India, there is a molecule called atorvastatin for cholesterol, right?
Yes, yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So how much is the cost of that drug in India?
20 mg, hardly 20, 30 rupees.
For how many?
I mean, 20 mg one tablet,
Okay.
depending on the brands. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Mm.
So here you said depending on the brand, because in
Mm.
India, from what I know, there is no product patent, right? So that same
Mm.
molecule, atorvastatin, was always marketed by 10 different companies under different brand names, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So in the US, right now, the molecule is generic. That means anyone can manufacture it. So that is called a generic molecule. But so once again, after all these clinical trials and everything, when the drug gets approved, so only the manufacturer of the product, only the sponsor can make it. No one else can. So during that period where they have exclusive rights to that particular product, say for 10 years, that's when they make the money. So one molecule of Lipitor, like one pill, if I remember correctly, one tablet used to cost, it was $10. So that means almost like back then it was like $1 was 50 rupees. So one tablet, the
Mm.
cost was 500 Indian rupee, like 10 years ago when Lipitor was still a brand only. So what happens is that, and again, that brings to the another topic. Most the payers in the U.S. Healthcare system is the insurance companies. So 50% of them is government insurance, the Medicare, Medicaid, and 50% is the private insurance. So the drug companies, they negotiate the price with the insurers. That look, we have spent this much money. I mean, we have to survive. So they negotiate the price with the insurance companies. And for the US population, a lot of the US people, they think it is not fair that they're the one who is paying for the cost of the drug, and the same molecule, it costs one-tenth the price if you cross the border and go to Canada. And I know a lot of people who go to Canada and they get their medicines there. So again, so this high price is only during the time when a molecule is available only as a brand. say Pfizer, when they came up with this molecule Lipitor, for 10 years in the US, you can only buy Pfizer's Lipitor. You cannot buy any other atorvastatin. That is the only drug that is marketed for atorvastatin in the US. And yes, in the US, each tablet is going to cost $10. At the same time, that same molecule in some other country was like 1 cent or 2 cent. So that is the thing. I mean, a lot of talks are going on about changing this and that, but I don't see any changes coming soon. And this is a process. So the government is actually bearing the cost, right? Because 50% of the insurance is the government insurance, and they are the one paying the price for the drugs. So this is how it is now.
Yeah. Thanks.
Dada, Prasenjit, I have a question. Like, suppose, for example, if a drug gets approved in US, and if that company wants to sell that drug in India, do they have to go through the same like approval phase again in India also?
I really don't know about that. I'm sure India has its own requirements. But from what little I know, I mean, FDA, once it is approved, it gets easy for any other country to get the approval from their own, whatever is equivalent of FDA in India. Anyone
Is it
who can give a better answer to this?
I can
For
add something.
vaccine, yeah.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. For vaccine, at least I can say the trial has to be done on Indian population as well. This much I know.
Yeah.
For any new vaccine before it gets approval. About the drugs, FDA, we have to take permission from DCGI, even if you're doing some trial, say some clinical trial or what. If it is not in the Indian market, only once the DCGI gives permission, then it is approved. Someone else can add as well.
So once the drug gets approved in the US, you have to again go through the clinical trials for the same drug in India?
Not
You have
necessarily.
to, not necessarily, but you have to take permission from the DCGI, that is
Okay.
Directorate Control of India. Then only we can use that. But for vaccine, the trial has to be done in Indian population.
Yeah, because there is, of course,
And this is,
variation on population.
yeah, this is Ritesh here, Dada. It's 95 batch. Typically,
Yes.
it is the guiding principle is the population studied and how representative that is of, let's say, even Asian population and the Indian population. And in most drugs, you could make that claim that it is probably similar and you get the approval. And as Dada said, is for vaccines, typically you need to go through because it's very specific and things like that. So there you have to go through. Basically, you submit, based on FDA, you submit an application asking for, means you have the data, it is representative and should be kind of approved. Versus you propose probably a small trial needs to be, it's called a bridging study, let's say, right? A bridging study needs to be done. It might not even be a trial, Dada. It might not be a phase 3. You might just prove the PK study. Through PK study, you could say that the concentration of the active ingredient kind of stays and all these. So it's all permutation combination is possible depending upon the science and the patient population, basically.
Okay, thank you. So it is more like what we call ANDA in US. It is called Abbreviated New Drug Application.
Yeah, that's correct. It could be.
Dada, there is another question. Like, since FDA is quite reputed and like many of the like organization around the world might approve because it is approved by FDA. Does it happen like if the drug gets approved in India and then an Indian company then goes to US? So is it that much easy for the Indian company as it is easy for the American company?
So far, I have not seen any drug in the US that was sponsored by an Indian company. All we see, like in the US, all the generic drugs, they're coming from India. So whether it is atorvastatin or lisinopril, all the generic molecules, they're coming from India, like Dr. Reddy, Sun, Tiva, all the generic molecules. So when it is brand, it is made here, or whoever gave them contract to manufacture it, so under the name of the US company. But only when it becomes generic, I see it being manufactured by the Indian companies. And so far, I have not seen any molecule that was sponsored by an Indian company, like its own molecule. I have never seen it yet. But they have to go through the same process, with the data they have. They have to study, again, based on the quality of the data and the size of the data they have, because a lot of the time some of these molecules, you can expedite the process by filing something called ANDA, which is abbreviated new drug application. So if we can show that this molecule is similar to something you already have approved, they will shorten the process. Or if you have done, but I mean, I talked to a few people in the FDA, but some of them, they express concern about how the trial is done in the other countries. So they have to be convinced that yes, it was done in a proper way, the data is believable. So that way, most of the time, they will require you to do some kind of trial, at least in the US market also. Because earlier, a lot of these studies were getting outsourced to other countries, the clinical trials. But now I see very less and less studies going outside. Because the thing is, with all the time and money spent, you really don't get quality data. You see a lot of data fabrication, just theek hai, chalta hai, karke kuch bhej diya. So I see a lot of more studies are done in the US.
Okay, Dada.
I can add something that if helpful.
Yeah, sure.
For example, once I was working with Aurobindo Pharma, which and they were planning at that point. I don't know if they did it or not, but planning of launching a more of a innovative product, not the generic version. And the idea then is their US counter. If you're planning on selling in the US or in EU and all these, you would rather conduct trial here, which is more accepted in other countries. Because if you do more in India and try bring here, because of the regulations and all these, it won't be accepted. So the team will be planning to do a trial in the US rather than in India, basically. So even those companies have their US subsidiaries, and they are the ones who will run the plan, design, and run the clinical trial more in the US or UK, meaning EU. And there could be a global study, meaning few people in India and all these. But without US trial, I don't think you'll get an approval here. Absolutely not. Not until now. Not until now.
Prasenjit, just to answer Vikas's question other way, now that Ritesh has taken name of Aurobindo Pharmaceuticals and Pharmaceutical, now US send their monitor to their laboratories or the factories to have a quality check. You must have seen few months ago the share price of Aurobindo went down because they have put in a kind of your quality is not good, you're not going to get it. So they kind of send their monitors and scientists, not scientists, monitors to their facility to check whether they're following the strict guidelines or not, especially for those generic drugs they're selling. So this is also important.
Yeah, and
thanks.
earlier the most of the visits used to be like scheduled visits. They will tell them that we are coming on this and this date, but now they are planning more like a surprise visit where they won't tell you they are coming, and they will just come up and check. And sometimes they are also undercover. They also come undercover. Like even in US, the auditors, they come undercover. They will just come, as if they are a janitor or something, and then they will start asking questions, and then 2 days later you get an email that I was at your site. We saw the following violations.
Excellent. Prasenjit, beyond the monitoring aspect and approval aspect of it, in future, do you think, or how do you see it, the whole process from a molecule to bedside, it takes a huge amount of time and billions of dollars or pounds or rupees, whatever you call it. With AI and the new way of analyzing molecules, mostly in the labs, as it happened with COVID vaccine, do you think the process of monitoring, vetting, will that change? And how will the regulators then keep a tab on what's going on?
So one thing, it is a honor system. I mean, you have to trust. At some point, you have to trust, right? So you have to trust that the data you are getting from the sites, it is good data. I mean, no matter how much audit you do, how much regulations you have, At up to a certain extent, you can do all those, but the basic level of trust has to be there. So it is already started, as I said, is that so when you enroll the patients, again, for the patients to follow up with the site every month, for a period of 16 months, 18 months, 2 years, is also difficult. They are just normal people, as I said, like you and me. So they are given something like a phone, and they are, they send you the monitor based on the study, or if it is like a COPD study, they will send you a spirometer where they wake up in the morning and they will log in, and they will themselves provide the data. So the goal is directly sponsored to patient. So you have mobile sites too. So all these things are happening. But I think, it will take time to take over this model of only sponsored directly to patients, because you need a wide variety of patients. One of the things that you study when you get the data is their income level, their education, because all these have effect on the outcome of the study. So yes, there is a population that can use technology, but there is still a lot of population that are not so uh, comfortable using the different technology.
Yeah.
So
So it's
as of
the
now, it is a
question.
mix.
Yeah. The question was two-part. One was about the monitoring and how things will change in future. But the other part is the phase one, phase two, phase three. Will there be a stage where the molecules um, they could be analyzed through AI platforms to find the right kind of molecule out of hundreds and thousands? You choose the right kind of molecule, and that sort of work is already going on, I guess. So will that do away with the need to do study in various stages, healthy volunteers, this, that, and the other? Could you not just personalize it?
The problem with personalization is that there's so many variables. Like say a molecule, it works perfect, but for a particular patient who is on a say particular diet, or that patient say takes some other medicine, there are drug interactions, there is interaction with food, there is interaction sometimes with their lifestyle. Because there are so many variables involved, I see the challenges. Of course, yeah, that will be like a perfect scenario, if you can personalize, everything is AI based. But just like, the self-driving car, there are too many variables that you won't need to study phase by phase in human volunteers. It's just because of the unseen number of variables that you conduct the trials. Because even simple things like, I know someone who smoked like 10 cigarettes and then came to give a COPD study, right? So, that was not in the questionnaire. Like the questionnaire asked, are you a smoker? Yes. How many packs a day? But no one knew that she just smoked and came to give the test. So there's so many variables. So that's what makes it a bit more challenging to be fully AI based. But of course,
Thank
yeah,
you.
that will be the goal.
Anybody else? Any questions?
Maybe I can add something to that discussion. So, hello
Yeah, sure.
everyone. Hello all dadas. I am a PhD student in Germany. I am alumni of 2015 class 12 and class 10 2013. So what Abhishek Da suggested is a really interesting discussion, like how are we looking at the future where we have AI based, and what Prasenjit Da said, I will just add up to that. So recently there was this DeepMind company who came up with this algorithm called AlphaFold, which can predict almost correctly, accurately, let's put that term, the structure of proteins, how proteins fold inside the cell. And as a biologist, this was one of the problems that was unsolved for decades of research, the protein folding problem. But still today, we, even after looking at that algorithm based prediction, we still have to confirm that it actually folds like it by doing structural analysis. There are techniques like X-ray crystallography or high resolution electron microscopy, which we use for that. And sometimes we find that these proteins have specific domains which doesn't fold what the algorithm predicts. So I think what Prasenjit said, and I mean, we will have improvement in AI-based technology, and then we will again have some variabilities, and then again improvement in AI-based technology. So it's a feed-forward loop that will go on. But I am pretty sure that it's going to help us rather than pose more challenges for us. It's going to speeden up the process of drug discovery. But the part of clinical trials, I think it's this precision thing is really a very interesting future that awaits us. Can I ask a question? I also had a question, if I allow me.
Sure.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Short one.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. My question is regarding how, I mean, first of all, thank you for the fantastic talk. And I really like the way you presented each and every aspect of the clinical trial. I want to ask about your role. So you in the circulation, it was said that you are the director of clinical research at Thrive, right? Can you say a bit about like what kind of how your day looks like in general? You have a previous background in research, as I find, and now I guess you are at a background where you have a research component, but also a very huge non-research component. How do you handle that? I would be really interested to know it.
Yeah, that's the sad part, I think, with every career. So we start with one thing and end up doing something else. So fortunately for me, after my PhD, I worked at the NIH, National Institutes of Health. So that's the first time, not the first time, so that's the second time that I learned what clinical trials are. Prior to that, during my PhD itself, so I did my PhD in bioengineering. So our department, it came up with a leisure-based treatment for post-operative healing. So we used to get a lot of patients. They were in pain following spinal fusion surgery, like for back pain, they will do back surgery. And that laser-based therapy was to minimize the pain. So during one summer, at that time I was single, so I thought, okay, let me spend some time seeing how the clinical trial thing is. So I got a little bit of idea of the clinical trials, and then at the NIH I got more into clinical trials. So anyway, so Thrive we are a site network. So we are a big group. We provide the sites to the CRO because we have a large patient population. Fortunately, I mean, we don't need to contact. They come to us for our patient like population. So my main part of my job is to read the protocol very carefully and see what are the studies we can do at our sites. And then a lot of it involves budgeting, making sure that this study will benefit us in the future, communicating with the regulators. I mean, half of the day spent answering emails and phone calls. So yeah, research, I mean, you need to have research experience to move up. And then I know people who willingly decide to be in research. They don't want to get involved in more of management work because they love research. So again, it depends on your preference. Again, I mean, how much impact you want to create. I mean, no matter how great the research is, so you can influence your particular group, but with a lot of the things that are decided in healthcare are unfortunately decided by people who are not in healthcare. So it's better to have people with healthcare knowledge making the healthcare decisions. So it's a compromise, and you have to decide, which way you want to go. But I mean, one thing I can tell you is that go where you want to go. So everything else will follow.
Thank you. And one more small thing, I mean, that was a follow-up question. So what if something, I mean, I think most of the time there are cases where something doesn't go through the approval. So there's a drug, you finished a certain part of the trial,
Yes.
and then suddenly comes up and so is it kind of a feed-forward mechanism? So like, does the research team try to understand what might have gone wrong and then fix something and get it back, or it's completely stopped, aborted, and something new is started? Any suggestions?
Yeah. The honest answer is it depends on what they have on their plate. So if they already have two other molecules that are very promising,
Okay.
they will forget about it for a short period of time. But if they do not have much, then they will spend more time on that. So it all depends how you prioritize, right? I mean, just like real life. So if they have about 3 new blockbuster molecule coming, it looks very promising. Most likely they'll forget it. That's what happens in like in the real scenario. But if they have already spent too much money on that, they will try to analyze what went wrong. They will try to make sense of the data that already came in, because no data is bad data. So even if the results are negative, that does not mean that data is bad. Data is data. You can always use it. It all depends how you plan to use it. The data is always useful. That's why one thing I always tell the young people who come in is that do not hide data, do not fabricate data. Be truthful to your data. I mean, the most sacred thing in research is data. Be very truthful to it. It will make sense one day, as long as it is truthful.
True.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else?
Hi Prasenjit, good evening
Hey,
and good.
Animesh, कहाँ छुपा था?
बस यहीं बैठा हुआ हूँ. अच्छा, is there any process consistency across the world in terms of the scientific approach you have spoken about, V1, V2, V3?
Yeah, so the basic idea is the same. The phase, you mean the 3 phases of the study?
Yeah. Is there any consistent, as in what you're saying is, say, 1.5 year it takes for one molecule to get approved completely, end to end, start V1 to
10 years, 10 years.
10 years. Okay, so is
Yeah.
there is the process consistent in US, EU, and say Asia, or is it different?
There are minor differences, but more or less, I would say 80%, 80 to 90% of it is same. Two things they look into. Number one is patient safety, make sure no patient is harmed, and number two, the integrity of the data. And with these two goals in mind, everything else follows. That why you do the phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. That is the rationale. That first, let's check on a small population, because you don't want a large population for phase 1, because what if the drug is not good, right? It does more harm. You want to minimize the bad effects. That's why you have small population for phase 1. So yeah, to answer your question, yes, it is more or less consistent throughout the world.
Yeah, got it. Thank you.
Thank you, buddy. I see a lot of familiar names now. Any other questions, anyone?
Dada, we have already gone
Exceeded
past
our
time.
Oh,
So you may go
sorry
ahead
about
and
that. I
wrap
should
up.
have paid more attention to it.
Not an issue, Dada, not an issue. And till the audience enjoys the session, it is always okay.
My pleasure. I had a great time sharing whatever little I know in this field with my Vidyapith brothers. Again, I mean, always thankful to Vidyapith for the group of friends, for the values. I mean, those are the two things we need most in life.
Thank you, Prasenjit. It was lovely catching up and listening to you, your expert views on various matters. Vikas, Ritesh, and all the Praktani brothers who have been involved with this initiative. A huge round of applause to all of you. It's been wonderful, and I'm sure whoever has listened to the talks over the months, in some way they have been enriched by the experiences shared by a very talented group of people. So power to you. Continue with it. Keep up. Many thanks.
Thank you,
Thank you once
Prasenjit
again,
Da.
everyone.
Thank you, Prasenjit Da, and thank you, Abhishek Da, for organizing this session.
প্রসেনজিৎ খুব ভালো লাগলো,
Oh,
really
thank
felt
you.
nice.
Thank you, Samudra. Thank you.
Thank you, Prasenjit. It was really enriching.
Thank you. Thank you, Anand.
Dada, I on behalf of the Vidyapit Praktani, I'd like to
Thank you, Bikash.
thank you for your time and effort. And Abhishek, you moderated the session so beautifully that like we all enjoyed the session. So I'd like to thank you from the bottom of my heart, and we might like to engage you again in like coming Addas. So thank you, Dada. Thank you everyone for joining us. Do fill the feedback form so that we can know what we can improve in the coming sessions. And thank you everyone. Enjoy Diwali, and let's meet again in the next Adda. Thank you.
Happy Diwali, everyone. Take
Happy
care.
Diwali.
Happy Diwali, everyone. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Happy Diwali. Yeah, bye.
Bye.